He's seen it on The Simpsons. So let's bring it back to the end times and to prophecy. And so we've got the Cold War, we've got the cults, we've got the CIA, the Pentagon putting money into these different evangelical groups. And let's not forget, I know you know this, John, and feel free to comment any input you have on it, but we might have a lot of listeners and watchers who don't know that a classic front for intelligence is being a missionary. So missionaries in foreign lands, this is old school CIA fronts, intelligence agencies using this as a front. USAID, Red Cross, these are classic CIA fronts. So don't believe the stories that you see. Now, I'm not saying every missionary is a CIA agent. That's not true. But I'm saying it can and easily be a front that's used for that kind of stuff. And it has many times over. There's plenty of books and documentation on that. But we have to also include that puzzle piece because that's a big part of understanding the Washington's foreign policy and how it likes to spread, especially Protestant Christianity, as well as Wim Hof shows Roman Catholicism, because it was part of that Cold War dialectic. Because how do you fight the Soviets? Well, you have a damn Baptist church in your city. That's how.
Well, you can take it back even further if you wanted to. Just establish foundation. The Jesuits were always good at paving the way for commerce.
That's a good point.
So, they go into a country, let's just say, one thing I would be a quasi expert on is California. California is founded by Jesuits, and they basically paved the way for opening up of the West and the railroads and all that type of stuff by, helping to civilize the Indians out there. So, so on and so forth. Commerce usually follows where, not only Catholicism in earlier time periods, but then in later time periods like now, evangelicism is kind of the, this is easy to discuss with someone like yourself. Evangelicism is the perfect postmodern Christianity. So it can move into any area, adapt itself pretty easily.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So it paves the way for commerce, and then it paves the way for the rest of the culture, which, a lot of Christians don't actually, they wouldn't actually think themselves to be, quote, to use a phraseology that Christians like to use, to be of this world.
Mm-hmm.
But yet they really are part of the culture. They really do accept a lot of the stuff that, like, someone like myself wouldn't. I wouldn't let my kids watch television or, that type of stuff. But a lot of Christians, the type of culture that gets proliferated into the, well, here's a perfect example. They have Muslim evangelists now.
They have Muslim evangelists. Is that what you said?
Aware of that?
You cut out there. Say that again.
Yeah, they have televangelist Muslims now.
I have heard this. I haven't seen it, but this also, by the way, is something Engdahl mentions in his book, that the success of Billy Graham was so beyond the expectations of what the CIA had in mind, that they realized all we've got to do is find the Billy Graham for the Muslim world. So that's what they were trying to do with a lot of these different characters. The Gulen guy is probably some kind of, but he's not, I don't guess, a very dynamic speaker. I don't know. But there's other kinds of people that they tried to interview. Miles Copeland in his book actually says the same thing. He says that they hoped Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser, would be an Islamic Billy Graham. So I'm not surprised that we're starting to see this now, because I think that does fit into the planned dialectic that they want to kind of Islamicize the West, not because they like Islam, but I see it as a long-term business plan. The globalists, I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah. And another thing I brought up on the call with Tim and Chris was that in Nicaragua during the Somoza Sandinista period, there was a guy who was like one of the leaders of the Campus Crusades in Nicaragua, and the Sandinistas caught him or something because he was carrying large sums of undeclared money.
Mm.
They were,
was it hidden under Gideon Bibles?
Yeah, he was. And basically with this article that I was reading in, it was a covert action bulletin. It was like a liberal type magazine from it was basically saying that, these Sandinistas had uncovered that the Campus Crusades was a CIA front, funneling money in to, do that, even though I would say that the Sandinistas themselves are a CIA front. So it was, more dialectic type stuff. But what you have, this is another thing that you have kind of popping up in the 70s and 80s as time progresses, and that the former Jesus people, or whoever, people being sucked into this new type of evangelicism, is this idea of that Christianity is going to fight communism. Okay, so it's not only that we have to be scared of the Cold War and we have to be scared of the nuclear apocalypse, but it's also pitting Christianity against communism directly, because communism is Satanism, and
right?
Christian and America is Christian. So Jesus equals America. Russia
right. City on a hill. Yeah.
And Russia equals Satan. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and then as we move down through the time period and you get to be guys like me and you, then you see this all played out in the plot to Rocky IV.
and in WWF, WWE, remember Ivan and Hulk Hogan?
Bolsheviks.
What's his name?
There was Boris Zukov.
Yeah,
Boris
that's
Zukov
it.
And Nikolai Volkov.
Nikolai Volkov, and then and he's wrestling Hulk Hogan.
Interestingly enough, when the Berlin Wall fell, Nikolai Volkov, if you remember, he turned on Boris Zukov, and he joined America, and he went rogue against the evil commie.
Let me say, this is another point I want to make here. Yes, everybody, I've probably had 20 people in the last few months send me the Yuri Bezmenov lecture. Now, yes, I have seen the Yuri Bezmenov lecture. It's been online going around for at least a decade or more. I'm not saying that the points that Yuri Bezmenov makes are false. So yes, there are like the Frankfurt School guys who would try to argue that if we can degrade the culture and make them relativists and so forth. But again, the real story of the Frankfurt School guys is that they were propped up by the CIA. And so even the alt-right people who get mad and bitch about the Frankfurt School people, they don't talk about the OSS and the CIA being who gave them the money to do what they were doing. Who do you think brought the Eastern Bloc people over? It was the OSS and CIA.
The Yuri Bezmenov. Bezmenov.
One last point, John. One last point. The reason I bring up the Yuri talk, and this is something that Mark Hackard has, disagree or agree with Mark Hackard or not, but he has some really good articles that he translated about defectors. And the important thing about defectors is that to whatever degree it's real or fake or staged, we don't even know the real story of these people. It could just be made up. Let's say that Yuri Bezmenov truly defected or whatever. Even if that's true, whatever comes out of Yuri Bezmenov is going to be what the CIA wants out. So defectors are great disinformation agents. They're great ways to prop up grandiose tales of the Marxist Cold War takeover. And I think that's crucial to understand that. And a lot of these, anti-Marxists and these people that are online, I'm not a Marxist, by the way, so don't even try to make that argument. But you can't trust defectors is what I'm trying to say. It just fits into the propaganda machine.
Yeah, the Yuri Bezmenov stuff never rang true to me, just because.
Could you speak up a little bit, John? People are saying they're having a hard time hearing.
I said it never rang true to me, because he's basically saying all the things that this, the culture in America was pushing on its own people. Mm-hmm. So why would you need the Russians to do that?
Exactly. This is what's so crucial. Well stated. I rambled there for like 10 minutes trying to say what John said in like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Another one is Anatoly Golitsyn.
I was about to say The Fall of the Wall and Anatoly Golitsyn. Yeah. Hey, maybe Anatoly Golitsyn knows about the fall of the wall ahead of time because the CIA is who told him that, not because he knew about the Sino-Soviet split secrets or whatever.
Yeah. And basically, to a certain extent, at the top, I don't think there's any difference between Cold War KGB and Cold War CIA. So they're both working for the same paymasters. But see, those type of things, whether it's KGB or CIA, whatever it is, they were crucial to the time period because it fueled the scary culture. A great television show. I don't really watch a lot of TV, but a really interesting show to kind of show what kind of psychology was being used on people at the time is The Americans.
Exactly. Yeah. And the CIA approves those scripts, by the way. So
sure, absolutely. But yeah, it's interesting to go back and kind of look at some of those things.
I will say real quick in the chat, we're not here to debate nukes. So the reason that some of these people are being, if you spam in here, I have the spam filter turned on and it will block the people that spam. So we're here to talk about the end times. It's not a debate on nukes. So anyway, sorry, John, go ahead.
You go ahead. There's a helicopter landing on my head.
So if I think about maybe let's talk a little bit about some of the biblical type end time stuff. So being raised in a Protestant evangelical church and then starting to read the Bible when I was 17, 18, really getting into it. Of course, everybody finds the book of Revelations fascinating. So you go and you read about the angels and the bowl judgments and the seal judgments. And it all sounds very, very wild, right? And if you're a Protestant evangelical, then you know that you already kind of have just this assumption that this is all about some sort of sequence of events at the end of the world. Now, I never had that view challenged. I never questioned it until I spent a lot of time in theology and did do a period of seminary work and really got into comparative religion and all this kind of stuff. And as everybody knows, I'm not a textual liberal. So this is not coming from a vantage point of trying to, from my view, say that the Bible doesn't have any divine inspiration or veracity or anything like that. But it's very simple, actually, to kind of show that even, and this is, I would say, even if you don't believe the Bible, I think it's still demonstrably true that these verses most of the time are referring to events contemporary with the apostles. So I'm just going to run through this really quick. The easiest way to understand this is to read Luke 21. And that's because Jesus says very clearly in verse 22 that he says, these are the days of vengeance in which all things written in the prophets must be fulfilled. And if you read the entire chapter, he's talking about that generation, the Jews and the people that are right there in front of him and his apostles and disciples. And that's why he says very clearly, he says, you will see Jerusalem surrounded by enemies, right? Know then that its desolation is near. Now, whether you believe it's inspired, I believe it's inspired, but whether you do or not, about 40 years later, that happened. So that, I think, is so obvious and so clear. And I'm not saying that there's nothing mysterious about the book of Revelation or whatever, but if you look at the pattern of the book of Revelation, the way it's structured with its judgments and what it talks about, it matches the pattern of Matthew 24, which is Luke 21, right? This is the Olivet discourse in both of those gospels. So I think it's very clear that the book of Revelation, the apocalypse, is talking about the same stuff that Jesus is talking about in that famous discourse. Therefore, the easiest way to approach, the clearest, I think, simplest way to approach these texts, whether you believe they're inspired or not, is to understand the historical context. And the historical context does have to do with apocalypticism of that time period. I'm not saying, by the way, that there's nothing future fulfillment for us as Orthodox or for Roman Catholics. There are the last things. There is, some events of the last times, like the final judgment, the resurrection of the body, these kinds of things. But we don't have this elaborate scheme that's all kind of drawn up like, John Hagee, here's my Bible prophecy church. The blood moons will cover Israel. The blood moon, I was trying to think of the blood moon pies. When I eat the blood moon pies, you'll know the end is near. That is literally how dumb John Hagee's shit is. But anyway, so we don't have charts. We don't have these like elaborate schemes because we don't know that. It's not told to us. So when we get towards the end, if I get this question a lot, I've not yet got to a point where I have the time to really, from my perspective, write an article. I do have an old article about the temple and Josephus that people could read if they want, Matthew 24 and Josephus compared. And you can find that in the archives. But also, I'll list a couple short books that people could read if they want to go down that route, because I do get a lot of messages about, what do you think about the end times? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I will say, too, that, again, the Orthodox Study Bible notes, they get it perfectly right. It's the first time there's ever been a study Bible that actually understands that these texts are talking about 70 AD. Now, there are aspects that do refer to future realities, but if you read my Daniel article, if you look at what the Orthodox Study Bible says in the Daniel notes, if you look at Daniel, it's talking about the same thing Jesus is talking about. And it's talking about what happened in the first century. And it removes a lot of this nonsense, which is a perfect tool for the state, for the Pentagon, for the CIA, for social engineers to concoct nonsense to fool a bunch of dummies. And they do the same thing with Muslims. Evangelicals are used the exact same way Muslims are. John, your comments?
Yes.
We're up to 2:30. We're up to 2:30. Let's see if we can. We're doing good. So go, John.
Yeah. Well, your thing with the Bible verses and all that. Like I said, I'm not an organized religion person.
That's cool, but I mean, you give your perspective on the end times and you being manipulated through the fear.
Sure. Well, I mean, an interesting thing just to note about apocalypse. Calypso kept Odysseus on an island, detained, and Calypso means to cover. So she's the goddess who keeps Odysseus on the island, detaining him on an island. It's interesting that the story of John the Revelator is on an island being detained, and he's talking about the apocalypse, the calypse, the uncovering. So interesting correlation there.
Are you doing a little bit of Jordan Maxwell for us, John?
That's all John Adams research there. Not no.
Of course, if you understand the apocalypse is clearly discussing the pterodactyls coming down through the hell portal gates into my backyard to initiate the end times as the beast.
The real Bible is you have to go to the Geneva Bible, Jay. That's the thing. The Geneva
That's good.
Bible.
The Geneva Bible.
That's the Geneva. No, yeah. So, but yeah, I think with the story of the revelations, and it can always be used no matter what time period it was. It was used in the Civil War. It was used in World War One, World
That's
War
a good
Two.
point.
Hitler was the beast.
Yeah. There were even in the 80s, they were saying Reagan was.
Reagan's the beast. Obama was the beast.
When I was a kid, barcodes. That was barcodes on all products are the mark of the beast.
Absolutely. UPC symbols are, I actually used to have a Christian book that had like little cartoon drawings in it of like people getting barcodes put on their heads, and that you were going to walk around with a UPC symbol barcode on you tattooed on your forehead.
I've seen like inmates that literally have UPC symbol like tattoos.
People would do that. I remember that in the 90s too, when people would get barcodes tattooed on them to show that.
That's right. It was a thing in the 90s. Yeah.
Antichrist. So, which I'm not an atheist by any means of the word, but people definitely go to the extreme to show how much they despise religion, which I do not despise religion or religious beliefs. But the thing of it is the evangelical culture primarily is based around a rapture. Now, there has been many people who have predicted raptures, including Chuck Smith. He predicted that the rapture was going to happen New Year's Day, 1981, and then nothing.
And how Lindsay had an 1988 prediction.
Yep. So they've all had these predictions, and so they've had to go back and rewrite the idea of it, saying, so before it was going to be a pre-apocalypse rapture, and then later it was going to be a post, we're going to have to live through the tribulation because people are starting to see, the signs of the new world order, or whatever people want to call it. And they're realizing they're going to have to actually live through some of these things that they believe are going to correlate with the book of Revelation. So they've come to the conclusion that they will actually have to live through the tribulation to make it through to the rapture. But during the 1960s and 70s, everybody was pretty convinced that the rapture was going to happen. And interestingly enough, there was movies made.
Yes, good point.
That went along with this and showed people, and it was actually proved. In fact, there was a movie made of the late great planet Earth that was narrated by Orson Welles.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you could look that up on YouTube. It's awesome. I mean that
like awesomely bad, right?
It's awesomely, it's good bad.
Yeah.
Another good bad one is A Thief in the Night, and you can watch that for free on YouTube too. And that's the one that scared the crap out of me as a kid. Watching that, there's people getting guillotined. There's the rapture comes and people are disappearing in their cars on the freeway, and traffic's at a standstill because people have
yeah. You know what I just watched a couple nights ago, and this probably fits into that. Is this like the 70s?
Yeah.
Okay. The Omen, which I put on the show banner, that's 70s. And I forgot that there's this really funny part. Anytime Hollywood tries to do apocalypse end time stuff, they make up Bible quotes every time in a movie. It's in tons of them. It's in End of Days. It's in
Seventh Sign.
Yes, Seventh Sign with Demi Moore. Anyway, so I'm watching The Omen, and Gregory Peck starts. Gregory Peck gives birth to the Antichrist, and he starts reading Bible verses, and he makes up this Bible verse that doesn't exist, and it's like, and he shall unite the entire European continent, and there shall be a comet that crosses the sky. That's literally what it says, and I'm sitting there thinking, that is the dumbest. Like, did none of them read the Bible at all?
No, I think he was actually reading out of the late great planet Earth. not the Bible.
Oh, I bet he was.
You know,
Yeah.